Chapter 1: The Rain-Soaked Encounter. The rain didn't stop. It came down in torrents, relentlessly battering the pavement and blurring the streetlights. I had always thought New York was magical, especially at night when the city's neon lights sparkled like stars. But tonight it felt like the city was trying to swallow me whole. And honestly, I wouldn't have minded. I tugged my damp blazer tighter around my shoulders, huddling under the small shelter my car provided as I stared at the dashboard, willing it to turn on. The engine sputtered, groaned, and refused to comply. Typical, another meeting down the drain, another day wasted. The stupid phone buzzed in my hand. Dead. Great. I cursed under my breath, my frustration swelling. This was exactly the kind of night that made me question my life choices. I should have listened to my gut and canceled the investor meeting, but no, I had to push through, had to try, and now here I was, standing on the side of the road, waiting for help that I wasn't sure would come. I glanced down the dark road. No headlights. The streets were eerily empty, the kind of empty that made me feel like I was walking through a dream. A bad one. The only sound was the rain slapping the asphalt and the occasional rumble of thunder overhead. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, biting my lip. Walking was probably my best option, but the thought of trudging through that dark stretch of road in heels wasn't exactly comforting. Then, as if fate had other plans, a black SUV appeared in my peripheral vision, its headlights cutting through the rain like a knife. The vehicle slowed to a stop beside me, the engine purring as the window rolled down with a soft hum. I blinked, half expecting a ghost to step out, but no, instead, a man did, tall, dark, and so out of place on this empty road. He stepped out of the SUV, his long coat flaring out behind him as he took in the sight of me. I couldn't make out much, but there was something wild about him, something untamed, like he belonged to the storm, like he was part of the dark sky. Need a lift, he asked, his voice low and smooth, a touch of amusement dancing in his words. I eyed him cautiously, resisting the pull of something deep inside me, something that felt like it was reaching for him, like a part of me had recognized him the moment I laid eyes on him. The strange thing was, I should have been running. He was a stranger and I had no idea who he was or what he wanted. But the way he stood there, looking at me with those dark eyes, there was something comforting about it, something that made me want to trust him, even when every rational part of me screamed not to. No, thank you, I said, voice firm, trying to keep the uncertainty out of it. I'll manage. He didn't move. Didn't say a word for a long moment, just stared at me, his gaze intense. It was the kind of look that made the air feel thick between us, like every passing second stretched just a little too long. I'm not going to bite, he said, and there was a flicker of something, almost like a smile pulling at the corner of his lips. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or run for the hills, but I definitely wasn't about to get in a car with some random stranger who was so appealing in a way that made me want to do exactly that. But then again, standing here alone in the rain, my car dead, no one else in sight, the road stretched on in front of me, and it felt like the kind of place where bad things happened, or worse, nothing at all. My brain fought the instinct to refuse him again. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to his car, curiosity winning out. Fine, I said, my voice barely louder than the rain. I'll take you up on that offer. He stepped back slightly, opening the passenger door for me, a movement so fluid it was almost predatory. I promise, you'll be safe. Safe. I wasn't sure why his words calmed me, but they did, almost like I could trust him. I slid into the car, the warm air hitting me almost like a shock after the cold rain. I couldn't help but notice how the leather seats seemed to mold perfectly to me, almost as if the car was tailored specifically for me. The moment I buckled in, I couldn't escape the sudden, inexplicable tension between us. It was more than just the silence. There was something primal there, like a pull that had nothing to do with how handsome he was or how much he smelled like the rain, and something else, something wild. He shut the door softly, walking around the front of the SUV before getting in. His movements were graceful, but there was strength behind every one of them. When he turned the key, the engine roared to life, and we began driving, the headlights slicing through the rain as the city faded into the distance. "I'm Lucian, by the way," he said after a moment, glancing at me, his voice steady but with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. I nodded, trying to shake the strange feeling that had settled over me. "Celeste." He smiled, but there was something different about it, something knowing. As though he'd heard my name before, though I had no reason to believe he had. "Nice to meet you, Celeste." "I wish I could say the same," I muttered under my breath, trying to lighten the mood, but my voice betrayed me with an unexpected quiver. Lucian's chuckle was soft, but it did something to me. The sound slid under my skin, making me want to smile, despite the ridiculousness of the situation. "I'm harmless," he said, voice tinged with amusement. "Though I can't speak for the rain, it's been a bit aggressive tonight." I laughed. It was a brief sound, but it felt good, my first laugh in what seemed like hours. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence, the tension in the air not uncomfortable, just present. Every time I caught him glancing at me, I felt that little pull again, something strange, something faded, and I hated that I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something I wasn't ready for, even though it was already here. The engine hummed smoothly under the quiet of the car as we drove. The rhythmic beat of the tires against the wet road should have been soothing, but it wasn't. It felt like the calm before something huge, something inevitable. Lucian's presence was hard to ignore. It wasn't just that he was sitting next to me, his shoulder brushing mine in the confined space. No, it was more than that. His energy radiated. It pulled at something deep inside of me. Something I couldn't quite understand, but I sure as hell felt it. I stole a glance at him, pretending to focus on the rain streaming down the side window. His jawline was sharp, too sharp, like it was carved from stone. His grip on the steering wheel was strong, fingers tense, and I couldn't help but notice the way the veins in his hand popped with every slight adjustment. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked, his voice breaking the thick silence between us, but it didn't feel awkward. More like an invitation to something unspoken. I shifted in my seat, the distance between us still feeling too close and yet not close enough. Just a few more blocks," I replied, "not far from here." He nodded, but didn't ask for more details, which felt a little strange. Most people would have at least tried to make some small talk to pass the time, but not him. He didn't need to ask. It was like he already knew. I caught myself glancing at him again, this time for a bit too long. The way his sharp features caught the dim light of the dashboard, the way his jaw clenched ever so slightly whenever the road turned a little too tight, and those eyes, those dark eyes that had shifted to a shade that wasn't quite brown, wasn't quite anything I could name. "Do you live around here?" I asked, trying to break the silence, my voice a little too high for my liking. Lucien didn't look at me, his focus completely on the road, but there was a soft shift in his posture, like he was barely holding himself back from saying something. "I know the area," he said cryptically. "A lot of it, actually." I raised an eyebrow, wondering what that meant. "Really? That sounds like a long story." His lips twitched, though I wasn't sure if it was amusement or something darker. Some stories are better left untold. Before I could respond, the sky cracked open with a flash of lightning, followed by a booming thunder that rattled the windows. I jumped in my seat, startled, and I wasn't the only one. Lucian's hands tightened on the wheel, his muscles shifting under his coat, and I noticed his eyes. For just a split second, his pupils flashed golden. I blinked. I had to have imagined it. I mean, it was probably just the lighting, or maybe I was just stressed, right? But the chill that ran down my spine said otherwise. "I'm guessing you're not from around here," Lucian said, his voice low, pulling me from my thoughts. I shook my head, trying to focus. "No, just visiting. I had a meeting earlier. It didn't go well." "Investors?" he asked, like he knew. I nodded, relieved that he didn't push for specifics. "Yeah?" "My startup's been struggling a bit, but it's fine. I'm used to disappointment." I tried to sound casual, but something about the way his eyes softened for just a moment made me feel like he could see right through me. "There's always another opportunity," Lucian said quietly, almost as if he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The car fell back into silence. This time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that settled in your bones when you were in the presence of something important. I looked out the window, watching the rain blur the world outside. We arrived at my apartment building in no time at all. Lucian pulled up to the curb, the streetlights casting a soft glow on the wet sidewalk. "This is it," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. But I didn't immediately move. There was something about being in the car with him that made me want to stay a little longer. He glanced over at me, his gaze lingering, something unreadable in his expression. "You sure you're okay?" I nodded, even though my pulse was pounding in my ears. "Yeah, thanks for the ride." I could feel his eyes on me as I opened the door, my hand reaching for the handle, and that's when it happened. As I stepped out of the car, our hands brushed. It was just a fleeting touch, nothing to be worried about, but the moment his skin made contact with mine, something sparked. I froze. A jolt ran through my entire body. Electric, warm, and unmistakably intense. I swear my heart skipped a beat. His grip tightened on the wheel, his breath barely audible. I looked back at him, my voice quiet, unsure of what had just happened. I'll be fine from here. You don't have to wait." He didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed ahead, his jaw set as if he were battling with something internal. "Celeste," he finally spoke my name, his voice low and rough, almost like it was dragged from him. "I'm not supposed to meet you like this. Not supposed to feel this." I couldn't form words, couldn't even breathe properly. I knew what he meant, the connection, the pull between us. It was more than just attraction. It was deeper. It was fated. And it scared the hell out of me. Before I could even think of responding, he turned the ignition, revving the engine to life, and as he did, he muttered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, "Fated." I watched him drive off, the car pulling away, leaving me standing there, my hand still tingling from the touch. A few moments later, I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head. Well, this is definitely not how I imagined my evening would go. I had no idea how right I was. Chapter 2. The Awakening. The moment my head hit the pillow, I was asleep. And then, I wasn't. I was standing in the middle of a dark forest, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The trees were tall, their branches twisting and weaving into the night sky, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I could hear the soft rustling of leaves, the whisper of something watching me. I turned, and that's when I saw them. Golden eyes, piercing, glowing, staring at me from the depths of the trees. It wasn't just the eyes. It was the way they felt. As if they were pulling me, calling to something deep within, something primal. A sound broke the silence, a wolf's howl, long and haunting, sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a sound, it was a summon, as if the creature was calling me, bidding me to follow. My heart beat faster. I should have been running, should have been terrified. But I wasn't. I was drawn to the howl. I took a step forward, my feet moving on their own accord, and the howl grew louder, closer. The golden eyes in the darkness followed my every movement, and I knew they belonged to the creature, the wolf, the thing that was calling me. I woke up with a gasp, my pulse racing, my breath coming in quick bursts. I sat up in bed, sweat beading on my forehead. My heart still pounded in my chest, thudding wildly as I tried to shake off the remnants of the dream. It was just a dream, right? The room was still dark, the only sound the faint hum of the city outside. I swallowed, trying to calm my erratic heartbeat, but something lingered, something I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the dream, it was the feeling that had followed me into waking life, like something was stirring inside of me, something I wasn't ready to face. I rubbed my temples, willing myself to relax. It was just exhaustion, nothing more. But the memory of those golden eyes, the pull of the wolf's call, it stayed with me long after I closed my eyes again. The next morning, I woke up to the sunlight filtering through my blinds, the soft warmth on my face, a welcome contrast to the unsettling dream. But when I swung my legs off the bed, the strange sensation from the night before still clung to me like a shadow. I padded into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, and reached for the coffee pot. The scent of brewing coffee hit me instantly, and it was overwhelming, too much. I recoiled, blinking in confusion. Since when had coffee smelled this strong? I was the one who lived for coffee. I shrugged it off, stirring the cup in front of me, trying to force down the bitter taste. But the taste? It was all wrong. It was too rich, too sharp. I set the cup down and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, trying to shake the feeling of something being off. I walked past the perfume bottle on my vanity as I got ready for work, and the scent, my usual comforting floral fragrance, hit me like a ton of bricks. It was too much, too intense. The smell clung to the air like it had never been this heavy before. I paused, looking at my reflection in the mirror. Something wasn't right. I felt like I was floating just a little outside of myself, like everything around me was sharper, louder, more alive. I grabbed my bag and headed out, trying to ignore the odd sensation swirling in my chest. It wasn't until I arrived at my office that the real shift began. As I stepped off the elevator, I was immediately greeted by the buzz of my team, their conversations blending into one constant hum. But it was the sounds around me, more than just the conversations, that had me on edge. I could hear the soft clink of coffee mugs being placed on desks, the tap of fingers on keyboards, the rustle of papers, but it wasn't just the noise. It was the details. I could feel the hum of the elevator as it moved, hear the soft thrum of the air conditioning, even the beat of my own pulse in my ears. It was almost overwhelming. Celeste? I blinked, coming back to myself, and turned to see Grace standing by my desk, her brow furrowed in concern. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I waved my hand dismissively, trying to hide the unease creeping through my chest. "Yeah, just a little tired, I guess." Grace didn't seem convinced. "You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost." I chuckled half-heartedly, shaking my head. "No ghosts, just a weird night." She raised an eyebrow, giving me a teasing smile. "I'm guessing that weird night involved a mysterious man." I froze, then laughed nervously. "What? No, Oh, please." She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was telling a juicy secret. "You can't possibly be this distracted without some serious eye candy involved. Spill." I rolled my eyes. "It's not like that. I met someone, but it wasn't..." She raised both eyebrows now. "Met someone? Oh, now you've got my attention. Spill the beans, Celeste. Tell me everything." I sighed and sat down at my desk, trying to focus. Nothing happened. Really, just, this guy gave me a ride home. That's it. Grace crossed her arms, giving me a skeptical look. "Uh-huh, a guy gave you a ride home? And you're acting like it's no big deal?" I opened my mouth to respond, but stopped myself, unsure of how to explain the pull I'd felt when our hands brushed. The strange connection that hadn't left me. How could I explain it when I barely understood it myself? "I think I'm just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "It's nothing." Grace watched me for a long moment, then shrugged, clearly unconvinced. "Well, if you say so, but I think you should probably call him again, just to make sure he's really as innocent as he seems." I managed a small smile, grateful for her teasing distraction. "I'll keep that in mind." But even as I said it, I couldn't help but think about the golden eyes, the haunting call of the wolf, and the pull I felt deep inside my chest. Something was changing, and I had no idea how I was going to handle it. I could feel the weight of the estate pressing down on me, each step echoing in the hollow, empty hallways. My mansion, my refuge, felt more like a prison tonight. I paced back and forth in the study, the dark wood beneath my feet creaking with each step. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth doing little to ease the cold gnawing at my gut. Every part of me screamed to go to her. But I couldn't. I shouldn't. Celeste. Her name still echoed in my mind like a sweet poison. She was my mate, no question. The pull between us was undeniable, stronger than anything I'd ever felt. But this wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. "Lucian," The sound of my beta's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. I didn't stop pacing. She's the one, Killian. I can feel it. She's mine. Killian's heavy footsteps were louder now, following my every move. I know, but you can't go near her. I know, I muttered, though it felt like an impossible truth to swallow. But I can't stay away. I want to be near her. Every damn minute of the day. Killian's voice softened, like he understood the struggle all too well. Lucian, if the pack finds out, if they learn about her... I clenched my fists. Don't remind me. It's not just your pack, though. Killian's tone was firm now, cold even. You've got enemies. People who would kill her to get to you. People who would use her to destroy you. I halted, the words striking deep. My enemies. The Order of the Black Crescent. They'd been hunting me for years, waiting for a moment of weakness, looking for any opening to exploit, and now they had one. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration and anger bubbling up. I can't do this to her. She doesn't deserve that kind of danger. You have to, Lucian, Killian said, his voice low and insistent. You have to let her go for her own safety. I swallowed hard, the ache in my chest growing with every word. But I can't. She's mine, Killian. The silence stretched out between us, heavy and suffocating. I knew what I had to do, but every instinct inside me screamed against it. Finally, Killian spoke again, his voice softer this time. You can't have her and keep her safe. You'll have to choose. I didn't answer. What choice was there? How could I choose between her and her safety? How could I live with myself knowing I'd abandoned her to protect her from the very thing that made her mine? Elsewhere, in a room lit only by flickering candlelight, a different kind of planning was happening. Sebastian Vaughn sat at the head of a long, ancient table, his dark eyes glinting with malice. The Order of the Black Crescent had always been a shadow in the underworld, working from the edges of society, pulling strings that few even knew existed. And now they had a new target. Lucien Devereaux is a threat to everything we've worked for, Sebastian said, his voice calm but dripping with disdain. We can't let him walk free. A man in the corner nodded, his eyes narrowed. But he's not like the others. He's an alpha. The alpha. We've seen what he can do. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Yes, but what he doesn't know is that he's already been compromised. His weakness is right in front of him, and he doesn't even see it. There was a murmur of agreement around the table. Sebastian's lips curled into a smile, cold and calculating. Lucian thinks he's in control, but the truth is we've been watching him for months, every move, every mistake, and now he has a weakness that will be our advantage. The man who had spoken earlier stepped forward. The woman? Sebastian's smile widened. Yes, Celeste Moreau. She's his fated mate, and we know how much he'll risk for her. He leaned forward, locking eyes with each person in the room. If he thinks he can keep her safe, he's wrong. We'll use her to draw him out. We'll make him break, and when he does, we'll be there to finish what we started. One of the other members, a woman with dark eyes that held more secrets than anyone cared to ask about, spoke. But if we move too quickly? We won't move too quickly, Leandra, Sebastian cut her off, his voice dark and sharp. We'll wait. He's already made the mistake of letting her in. Now he'll watch her slip through his fingers, and we'll be there to take control. His eyes gleamed. This will be the beginning of the end for Lucien Devereaux. The room fell silent as the members of the Order exchanged glances. It was clear they were all in agreement. But it wasn't just Lucian's return that they were worried about. It was the fact that his fated mate was now part of the equation. The Order had waited a long time for this moment, and now they would use Celeste to bring Lucian to his knees. Chapter 3: The Unfinished Legacy. The air in my childhood home smelled exactly the same: wood, old books, and a faint hint of lavender. My grandmother's scent, the one that had lingered even after she passed. I hadn't been back here in years. In fact, I'd almost forgotten how it felt to be in this house. The creak of the floorboards, the way the afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the dusty furniture. It was all so familiar and yet distant. My mother was out, running errands, which gave me the perfect chance to rummage through the attic, where I knew my grandfather's old things had been stored. He'd been a strange man, always scribbling in notebooks, muttering about things most people didn't understand. He had a deep love for history, but it wasn't just any history. It was about things that no one had ever spoken about, things I only ever heard whispered in passing when I was a kid. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, my heart beating faster with every step. The attic smelled like memories. Old, dusty memories. I could already feel the weight of them as I opened the door. There were boxes stacked haphazardly, some labeled with my grandfather's spidery handwriting, others just piles of forgotten belongings. "Let's see what you were hiding, Grandpa," I muttered to myself as I dug through one of the boxes. The first few things I pulled out were just old. Papers, more papers, some photographs, some books. But then my fingers brushed against something unusual. It was a thick folder sealed shut with a wax stamp, dark red, nearly black. The symbol on the stamp was unfamiliar, a twisted looping design that looked almost animalistic. I hesitated before carefully breaking the seal, unsure of what I was about to uncover. Inside were a series of documents, neatly stacked, each page filled with strange symbols and drawings that made no sense to me. But there was one thing that caught my eye. Written in bold letters across the top of one document, it said, "Lunar Bloodlines." I flipped through the pages, scanning the cryptic language, the strange references to pack hierarchies. It looked like some kind of family tree, but not one I'd ever seen before. The names seemed odd, half familiar, half completely foreign. I could feel the weight of something ancient pressing against me, something that felt like it was calling to me, pulling me closer to the paper. But there was no denying the chill that ran down my spine. Then I found it, a photo. A faded image of my grandfather standing next to a man I didn't recognize. He looked about the same age as my grandfather, but his features, there was something otherworldly about him. His eyes were too intense, too bright, almost like they weren't human. But what struck me the most was how familiar his face seemed, as if I'd seen him before, even though I knew I hadn't. I stared at the photo for a long time, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Something about this man, his dark eyes, and the way he stood with my grandfather made my heart race. I couldn't look away. "What is this?" I whispered to myself, my voice barely a breath. It wasn't just the photo that was strange. It was the feeling that gnawed at me. I had no idea who this man was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was connected to him somehow. That this image, this moment, had something to do with me, with what was happening now, with Lucian. Before I could think too much about it, I shoved the photo and documents back into the folder, sealing it again. It felt wrong to be looking at it, but I couldn't ignore the deep sense of urgency inside me. That evening, as I sat down to dinner with my mother, I couldn't stop thinking about the folder, the documents, the photo. I hadn't told her what I'd found. I didn't even know how to begin explaining the sense of connection I felt. Like a string being tugged deep inside of me, pulling me toward something I couldn't quite name. My mother sat across from me, her usual cheerful demeanor in place. "So, did you find anything interesting in the attic?" she asked, her voice light, almost dismissive. I hesitated, stirring my food more than I actually ate. "Yeah, a lot of old papers. Nothing really that important." I didn't want to mention the symbols, the family tree, or the photo. It all felt too personal, too strange. My mother smiled, completely oblivious to the chaos going on inside my head. "Your grandfather had some eccentric theories, but he was harmless. He always thought the world was full of hidden histories. Eccentric, that was her go-to explanation for everything he ever did that didn't make sense. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more." "Yeah, I know," I muttered. "But some of this stuff, it feels different." My mother's smile faltered, and she gave me a soft, concerned look. "Honey, it's probably nothing. Your grandfather was just, well, he was a dreamer, always reading into things that weren't there." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tapping on the edge of my glass. "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. I couldn't explain it. Not to her, not to anyone. But deep down, I felt the connection, like the past was reaching out to me. Something bigger was at play here, and that man in the photo, he was the key. Well, it's getting late, I said, trying to steer the conversation away from things I wasn't ready to talk about. I think I'm going to head to bed. My mother nodded absently, busying herself with cleaning the dishes. But I could see the hint of worry in her eyes, the same worry she always had whenever I got caught up in my grandfather's legacy. I left the table and made my way back to my childhood room, the same room I hadn't slept in since I was a teenager. I tossed and turned that night, my mind racing, the photo, the documents, the connection that I couldn't shake. It was all tied together, and it had to do with Lucien. I wasn't ready to confront it all, not yet. But I knew I had no choice. I had to find out the truth. The ballroom was alive with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft laughter that floated in the air like a distant song. I should have been paying attention to the investors around me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or rather someone, was drawing me in. I was standing near the corner of the room, pretending to listen to a man in a sharp suit talk about a partnership opportunity, but my mind was elsewhere. My gaze kept drifting toward the far end of the ballroom. Maybe it was the way the crowd parted around him. Maybe it was the undeniable pull that made my pulse quicken. Then I saw him. Lucien. He was standing by the bar, his dark eyes scanning the room. When our gazes met, everything else disappeared. The noise of the room, the clinking glasses, the buzz of conversation, it all blurred into the background. My heart skipped a beat, and I could feel that familiar pull, that magnetic attraction drawing me toward him. I couldn't stop it. It was like gravity, and I was helpless against it. I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the conversation I was still pretending to follow. But it was impossible to ignore the way his eyes burned through me, dark and intense, like they were tracing the very core of who I was. Celeste? The investor's voice broke through my haze, but it was as if I couldn't hear him anymore. My breath caught in my throat as I took a step forward, almost involuntarily. Celeste. His voice, low and rich, sliced through the crowd like a blade. Lucien's words wrapped around me, pulling me closer, making my heart race. I turned to face him, my body moving before my brain could register it. He was standing there, in front of me now, his presence overwhelming and steady, like he had always been here, like he was meant to be here. His lips quirked into a small, almost hidden smile, and I could feel the air between us charge with an unspoken understanding. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, as though sharing a secret no one else could hear. I tilted my head, not knowing whether to laugh or pull away. "Why's that?" His gaze softened, but there was a flash of something darker beneath his eyes. "Because I'm not supposed to be near you." "But it doesn't matter, I can't stay away." Before I could say anything else, the investor beside me cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to get my attention. Lucien didn't take his eyes off me. His presence felt too close, yet I didn't want him to move away. "Excuse me," I said quickly to the investor, offering a polite smile before stepping closer to Lucien. "You really shouldn't be here," Lucien repeated, but this time his voice had a hint of something almost dangerous. I opened my mouth to argue, to say something about how ridiculous it all was, how I should have kept my distance, how everything about this situation was wrong. But my words died in my throat. Because at that moment, I didn't care. It was just him and me. Before I knew it, Lucien took my hand, guiding me toward the dance floor. The music shifted, a slow, haunting melody filling the room, but it felt like the world around us faded away. The crowd disappeared, leaving only the two of us, moving together in perfect synchrony. His hand settled on my waist, firm but gentle, and I couldn't ignore the heat of his touch, the way it seemed to burn through my dress and straight into my skin. My pulse quickened, but not from fear, from something else, something stronger. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the hard muscle beneath his suit, and it wasn't lost on me that I was aware of every little detail. His scent, fresh and woodsy, surrounded me, wrapping around me like a blanket. His body moved with a fluid grace that made me feel like I was floating. "You know," I said, my voice a little too breathless, "I don't even know why I'm here." "Because you were drawn to me," Lucien replied, his lips curling into a smile that was both charming and unsettling. "You felt it, didn't you?" I nodded, unsure of how to respond. unsure of how to explain what was happening between us. It wasn't normal, it wasn't logical, but it was real. His grip tightened around me slightly, and I could feel his heart beating in time with mine. For a moment, I didn't feel like the businesswoman Celeste Moreau struggling to make a name for herself. I felt like I belonged here, in his arms, in this space, with him. But there was a part of me that knew something was off, something he wasn't telling me. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" I asked, my voice soft but direct. Lucian's eyes darkened, and for a moment I swore I saw something dangerous flash through them. "You're better off not knowing." I raised an eyebrow. "You're not the boss of me." He chuckled, the sound low and filled with something almost too intimate. "I didn't think I was." There was a beat of silence, and I could feel the tension between us, thick and palpable. The way he held me, like he was afraid to let go, but afraid to pull me closer at the same time. "Stay away from me, Celeste," he whispered suddenly, his breath warm against my ear. "It's safer that way, but if you ever need me, I'll find you, no matter where you are, no matter how far." I swallowed, my heart racing at the intensity of his words. "That's a little dramatic, don't you think?" "I'm not joking," he said, his voice deep, low, and full of an unspoken warning. I pulled back slightly, just enough to look him in the eyes. "I don't need you to find me. I'm perfectly capable of finding my own way." His gaze softened, and for a moment I saw something vulnerable in him, something raw, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You don't know what you're getting into, Celeste," he said, his words laced with a heaviness I couldn't ignore. "Stay away from me, for your own sake." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You're starting to sound like a broken record." But even as I said it, I knew he wasn't lying. And somehow that only made me want to know him more. Chapter 4. The First Attack. The night air had cooled after the gala, and I was more than ready to leave the swanky ballroom behind. The soft buzz of laughter and clinking glasses had slowly faded as I made my way out of the building, stepping onto the dimly lit street. I was alone, my heels clicking against the pavement with each step, the remnants of my earlier conversation with Lucian still swirling in my mind. The heat from his touch, the weight of his words lingered like a gentle pressure on my chest. I was not supposed to be this distracted, but here I was, walking down a quiet, empty street, my thoughts more consumed with him than with the business world I was trying to build. The click of my heels echoed in the silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. A glance over my shoulder confirmed nothing. Just the empty street, the dim streetlights casting long shadows. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew stronger, like I was being followed, like there was someone or something just out of sight. I picked up my pace, but it wasn't until I reached the alleyway that I realized how foolish I'd been. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I turned down the narrow path toward my car. The shadows there felt wrong. Too thick, too heavy. A figure stepped out from the shadows, moving quickly, silently. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. Before I could even process what was happening, the figure lunged. A flash of a dark mask, a glint of steel, and my breath caught in my throat. I screamed, but the sound barely escaped before a blur of motion, too fast, suddenly appeared between me and my attacker, Lucian. He was there in the blink of an eye, his presence like a wall of power that filled the alleyway. His hand shot out, grabbing the attacker by the throat and lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. I gasped, my body frozen in shock. "You really shouldn't have done that." Lucian's voice was low, a growl underlying his words. The air between us seemed to hum with something wild, something primal. The masked figure struggled in his grip, but Lucian didn't budge. His gaze locked on the man as if he were no more than a nuisance. I tried to take a step forward, but my legs were shaky, my body still reeling from the sudden fear. "Lucian," I breathed, unsure if I was supposed to be relieved or terrified. His eyes turned toward me for a brief moment, and there was something in them, something familiar, before he returned his full attention to the man in his grip. "Stay back," Lucian commanded, his voice a low warning. I couldn't help it. My heart pounded, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. "What the hell is going on?" I managed to say, even though it came out more breathless than I intended. Lucian's eyes narrowed as he spoke. This isn't just some random attack. He's not human. Before I could ask what that meant, he threw the man to the ground with a force that made me wince. The man hit the pavement hard, but didn't make a sound. Lucian's movements were almost too smooth, too swift, like he was something other than just a man. I took a step back, my mind racing. What the hell was happening? Lucian, he wasn't normal. I'd known that much from the moment I met him, but now, seeing him in action, seeing the way he moved, too fast, too strong, it was almost like watching something out of a fantasy. A beast. The man in the alley stirred, trying to rise, but Lucian was on him in an instant, his hand gripping the man's wrist with crushing force. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the flash of something inhuman in Lucian's eyes. The pupils were too wide, too bright, almost glowing. And then I saw it, a glint of silver, sharp and lethal. Lucian's claws, his claws extended, gleaming in the low light. They weren't just hands anymore. They were weapons, gleaming and predatory. I could barely breathe as my eyes locked on them, then shot up to his face. "You're not human," I whispered, unable to stop myself. His gaze was intense, but there was something else in his expression. A flicker of guilt, something hidden, but it was gone before I could truly understand what I saw. "You should stay away from me, Celeste," he said, his voice like a velvet warning. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't look away. "I'm not the person you think I am." I took a step forward, against every instinct telling me to turn around and run. "I don't care what you are." The words slipped out before I could stop them. You just saved me." Lucian's eyes softened, just for a second, before he returned his gaze to the attacker on the ground. "That's not the point." He spoke through clenched teeth. "You don't know what I'm capable of." Before I could respond, Lucian turned away from the man on the ground and stood over him, his claws retracting slowly as the man scrambled to his feet, visibly shaken but unwilling to stay down. Lucian didn't move. Didn't need to. The other man knew better than to challenge him. I could barely get the words out. "What are you?" Lucian's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw the true weight of everything he was carrying. It wasn't just fear or anger. It was something much deeper. "I'm the thing you've been running towards since the moment we met," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. "And the thing you should be running from." I didn't understand, not fully, but I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him, the connection. It was too strong, and no matter how much he tried to warn me away, it was like the universe was pulling me closer to him. "I don't want to run, Lucian," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, but it was the truth. "I don't want to run from you." The look he gave me was filled with something I couldn't quite name, something warm and dangerous all at once. But just as quickly it was gone, buried beneath the cold, calculating alpha that he had to be. "We'll see," he said, his voice distant. "We'll see if you can handle what I am." And with that, he turned, his eyes glowing in the night as he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, unable to look away. The car ride to Lucien's estate was silent, my thoughts a tangled mess of questions, confusion, and something deeper, something that felt too real to ignore. The attack in the alley, the strange things I'd noticed about him, the way everything seemed to connect in ways I didn't understand. Lucian hadn't said much, but his presence was heavy beside me, like a force I couldn't escape. When we finally pulled into the long, winding driveway of his estate, I couldn't help but stare out the window at the sprawling grounds, the darkened mansion looming in the distance. The house was ancient, with tall stone walls, towering windows, and an air of secrecy that wrapped around it like a shroud. Lucian cut the engine and turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I barely heard him. My mind was too busy racing, trying to process everything that had happened. "Sit down? Lucian, I shook my head. "You can't just—" His hand on my arm stopped me mid-sentence. It was firm but gentle, and for a moment I was struck by how right it felt to be this close to him. "We're not leaving until you understand the truth," he said, His voice quiet but resolute. I nodded, my mouth dry as I followed him out of the car and up to the grand entrance. My stomach twisted in knots, my mind still grasping for any rational explanation. Inside, the mansion was even more intimidating than the outside. Grand chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their soft glow casting long shadows across the cold marble floors. I followed Lucian through the winding halls, my footsteps echoing in the silence. We stopped in a large, dimly lit room that felt like it belonged in a different era, with its ancient furniture and towering bookshelves. Lucian turned to face me, his eyes softer than before, but there was a wariness to them, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "I'm not like you," he started, his voice low. "You're not like me?" I echoed, confusion bubbling up inside me. "You've been acting like a completely different person from the beginning. I'm getting tired of all these damn mysteries, Lucian." I wasn't shouting, but there was a frustration in my tone I couldn't hide. He ran a hand through his hair, taking a breath before continuing. "I'm a werewolf." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I laughed. Nervously. "A what?" I barely recognized my own voice. "I'm a werewolf. And I'm the exiled alpha of the Devereaux pack," he said quietly, the weight of his words settling in the room like an anchor. I stared at him, feeling as if the ground beneath me had just cracked open. A werewolf? Exiled alpha? My mind struggled to wrap around it, the way he moved, the way he looked at me. How had I never felt it before? Why hadn't I put the pieces together sooner? His voice broke through my fog of thoughts. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want you to be dragged into this world, but it's too late now. You're already a part of it." I took a deep breath, holding my head as if the room were spinning. "You're a werewolf. Celeste." He took a step toward me, his gaze soft but urgent. "I didn't want this for you. The pull, the bond between us, it's not something I can control. But I can protect you. I can keep you safe." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to, but I couldn't help but feel lost. I blinked, trying to focus, trying to steady my racing heart. It made sense. Deep down, I knew it did. There were too many strange things about him, too many moments where he'd seemed not quite human. I laughed, though it came out more like a breathless exhale. "I thought I was just crazy, but this is real. You're real." He nodded slowly. "I'm real, and I'm your mate." And just like that, the weight of everything hit me. My pulse sped up again, and I reached out for the nearest chair to steady myself. "Wait, you're saying we're mates?" I didn't even know what to make of that. The thought of being bound to him forever suddenly seemed both impossible and inevitable. Lucian stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine as he leaned down slightly. "Yes, you and I, Celeste, we're bound together by fate. Your grandfather," Lucian began, his voice quiet again, "wasn't just a researcher. He was involved in the supernatural world." In my world, I stiffened. "What do you mean, involved? My grandfather?" "Yes, your grandfather. He knew about werewolves. He knew about the pack." I shook my head. No, he didn't. He was obsessed with his own theories, but he wasn't part of all that. He couldn't have been. Lucian looked at me with those piercing eyes, the weight of centuries-old secrets pressing in on us both. "He was more involved than you think. Your grandfather was a key player in the supernatural world, and his research wasn't just about history, it was about control." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. "Control?" I echoed. "What are you talking about?" Lucian's eyes darkened as he spoke. "Your grandfather didn't just study us. He tried to manipulate the balance of power between the packs, and when he died, some of his research fell into the wrong hands." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Wait, are you saying my grandfather was working against you?" "Not against me, exactly, but his research. It could be used to hurt the pack, to disrupt everything we've fought for, and now—" "It's your responsibility, Celeste. The unfinished business isn't just his. It's yours now." I stared at him, the weight of his words settling in. "What does that mean for me?" It means you need to finish what he started, but it also means you'll have to choose. Choose what you want. Choose how deep you want to go into this world. I didn't have to ask why. The bond between us, the pull I couldn't deny, was pulling me closer to him, closer to the danger and the responsibility of what he was saying. I swallowed hard. And if I choose to walk away, you can't, he said softly, but there was no doubt in his words. You're already too far in, Celeste. There's no going back. Chapter 5. The Mark of Fate. I couldn't sit still. My legs were bouncing under the table, and my fingers drummed against my glass, the sound too loud in the quiet room. Lucian sat across from me, calm, collected, like he wasn't rattling every single part of my world with the simplest of words. You can't be serious, I said, shaking my head. Fated mates? That's crazy. Lucian's gaze never wavered. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers curling around his glass as if he were more at home in this conversation than I was. It's the truth, Celeste. Fated mates are bound by something stronger than choice. We don't get to pick. It picks us. Picks us, I repeated, my voice a little too high-pitched. I don't know about you, but I'm not in the mood to be picked by anyone, let alone someone who thinks this whole mating thing is fate. I'm not some, dog that just falls in line with whatever the universe decides. Lucian's lips curled, but there was no amusement in his smile, only something deep and intense, as if he could see right through me. I'm not asking you to accept it. I'm just telling you how it is. You don't get to change it, Celeste. We're fated. I wanted to argue more, to tell him I didn't believe in destiny or fate. I believed in what I could control, in hard work and determination, not in some invisible thread tying me to him. But I couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny the way my heart sped up when he was near, the way I couldn't seem to think straight when his eyes locked onto mine, the way my body ached with a need I didn't understand. A need that only seemed to grow the closer he got. My chest tightened, and for a moment I just stared at him. The words I wanted to say, no, I don't believe in this, stuck in my throat. Lucian noticed my hesitation, his eyes softening as he leaned in slightly, his voice lower now, almost coaxing. I know this doesn't make sense. I know it's overwhelming, but I'm telling you, Celeste, this bond between us, it's unbreakable. You feel it, don't you? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The truth was, I did feel it. The pull, the ache, the undeniable connection. Every moment with him was like a siren's call, and the closer we got, the harder it was to resist. Even if I don't believe it, I said, finally finding my voice. It doesn't change the fact that I don't want to be tied to some supernatural bond. I tried to shrug it off, but the words tasted bitter in my mouth. I'm not some mythical creature that just falls in love with a werewolf because of fate. You're right. You're not a mythical creature. But I am, he replied, his voice almost teasing. And you're my mate whether you like it or not. I gave him an exasperated look. You're impossible. His smile widened. And yet, you can't stay away, I groaned, rolling my eyes. You're really going to use that line on me? I wasn't planning on it, Lucian said, his voice suddenly serious, but you're making it hard to argue. The moment hung between us, charged with tension. I could feel the heat of him across the table, and despite myself, my body reacted. I wasn't sure if I wanted to punch him or kiss him, but I was very sure of one thing. He was getting under my skin, and I didn't know how to stop it. Before I could say another word, Lucian was standing, his movement so swift it made my head spin. He crossed the distance between us in a heartbeat, his hand on the back of my chair as he leaned down, his breath warm on my ear. Do you really want to keep fighting this? His voice was low, dangerously calm. Because every time you try to push me away, the pull only gets stronger. I get stronger, and so do you. I swallowed hard, the words dying on my tongue as his lips hovered just inches from my skin. It was like the universe had stopped spinning, leaving just the two of us suspended in this moment. I I don't want this, I said, the words coming out weak even to my own ears. Lucian's chuckle was dark and rich, full of something I couldn't name. You say that now, but your body, your heart, they don't lie. My breath caught in my chest as his hand slid gently under my chin, lifting my face to meet his gaze. The intensity in his eyes was so raw, so real, that I almost felt like I couldn't breathe. His gaze dropped to my lips, and I could feel the world narrowing down to this one single moment. He leaned in, just a fraction closer, and I could feel the heat of him, the heat of this impossible pull, the connection. It was too much. I couldn't help myself. Before I even realized what I was doing, I closed the space between us, our lips crashing together in a kiss that was desperate, hungry, and full of every emotion I'd been trying to suppress. It wasn't just a kiss, it was everything. It was the bond between us igniting into something that felt too real to deny. His mouth moved against mine with urgency, his hands pulling me closer, closer until there was no space left between us. But just as quickly as it had begun, he pulled away, his hands gripping my shoulders as he breathed heavily. His golden eyes were darker than I had ever seen them, like something feral was struggling to get free. You don't get to decide when I claim you, he said, his voice rough, almost ragged. But I won't do it until you choose me. Until you're ready. My chest heaved, and I was too stunned to say anything. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered, his lips brushing against my forehead. But I won't force you into this. The choice is yours, Celeste. My head was spinning. I wanted to kiss him again, wanted to feel the weight of him against me. But there was a part of me, a small voice in the back of my mind, that whispered that I wasn't ready yet. And yet another part of me, something deep and truthful, was already answering him. I didn't know how to admit it, not yet, but somehow I knew deep down that I would never be able to walk away from him. I don't know what to do with you, I whispered, my voice unsteady. Lucian smiled softly, his thumb brushing my cheek as he gazed down at me. You don't have to do anything. Just trust me. And in that moment, I wanted to. I never liked surprises. I liked order, structure, a plan. So when I walked into my apartment to find my mother and uncle sitting on the couch, their faces drawn with that look, the one that meant they were about to drop a bomb, I immediately felt my stomach tighten. Mom, I greeted, dropping my bag by the door, the sense of unease creeping up my spine. Uncle Marcus, what's going on? Neither of them answered immediately. Instead, my mother just gave me a look. One that I knew meant, you're not going to like this. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, and her eyes were too still, too guarded. My uncle, on the other hand, looked like he hadn't slept in days, the exhaustion clear in the deep circles under his eyes. Sit down, Celeste, my mother said softly, her voice unusually calm. We need to talk. That's when I knew something was very wrong. My mother's calmness was always a warning sign. I sat across from them, suddenly too aware of how small the room felt, of how the air between us seemed to thicken with every passing second. What's going on? I repeated, a little sharper this time, my pulse picking up speed. Uncle Marcus let out a breath, his gaze drifting to my mother before he finally spoke. We've been meaning to tell you for a while now, but it's time you knew the truth. I frowned, trying to push down the rising panic in my chest. What truth? My mother exchanged a glance with him before she spoke. You're not just connected to this world, Celeste. You've always been a part of it. I blinked, not sure if I was hearing her correctly. What are you talking about? The Order of the Black Crescent, my uncle said bluntly, his voice hard. Your grandfather didn't just study supernatural creatures, he worked with them. And we've been a part of it too. A chill ran through me. The room suddenly felt like it was closing in, my breath a little too shallow. Wait, what are you saying? You're connected to them, my mother added, her words cold. The Order, the supernatural world, and Lucian. Her voice faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. Lucian is a danger to you, to everything we've worked for. I blinked rapidly, trying to process what they were saying. The Order? The Black Crescent? My family had ties to them? That didn't make sense. Lucian, I whispered, my voice hoarse. What does he have to do with this? My uncle's gaze sharpened. Lucian is the alpha of a pack, Celeste. An exiled alpha. That alone is enough to cause problems, but you, being his mate, that's a problem for us all. I recoiled as though I'd been slapped. Mate? The word was like a blow to my chest. I'm not his mate. What are you talking about? You don't understand, Celeste, my uncle continued, his voice hardening. Lucian is not just some man. He's a threat, and your connection to him puts you, all of us, in danger. My heart was hammering now, my pulse pounding in my ears. I don't believe this. You're telling me that Lucian is some sort of monster, and that it's my fault because I'm connected to him? You don't know what you're getting yourself into, my mother said, her eyes filled with something I couldn't place. Fear? Regret? We told you to stay away from him. I shook my head, the world spinning around me. No, I can't do this. I won't believe it. My uncle's face hardened and he leaned forward, his voice quiet but deadly serious. You need to stay away from him. I'm telling you, Celeste, he'll bring you ruin. You have no idea what you're up against. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. My own family, was telling me that Lucien, the one person I'd trusted the most, was dangerous. How could I believe that? How could I? I can't do this, I whispered, standing abruptly. I'm not going to listen to you. I won't. My uncle didn't try to stop me as I stormed out of the apartment, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Nothing made sense anymore. I couldn't just turn my back on Lucien. I couldn't. But what if they were right? What if everything I'd been told about him, about this world, was a lie? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying my mother and uncle's words, the weight of their warnings pressing down on me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. But what I did know was that the pull I felt for Lucien wasn't something I could just walk away from. But then, something happened that shook me to my core. I got a call from Lucien's house. Celeste, Killian's voice was urgent on the other end of the line. Lucien, he's collapsed. I barely registered the rest of his words as panic shot through me. I didn't think, I just acted, running out of my apartment and into the night, my feet carrying me faster than I thought possible. When I reached Lucien's estate, I found him on the floor of his living room, barely conscious, his face pale, his body trembling. Lucien! I rushed to his side, panic rising in my throat as I knelt beside him. What happened? What's wrong? Killian, who was already there, stepped back as I touched Lucien's hand. His skin was cold, unnaturally so. It's the curse, Killian said, his voice tense. It's starting again. I turned to him, confusion spreading through my chest. Curse? What are you talking about? Lucien groaned, his eyes flickering open, but there was no strength behind his gaze. It's not natural. His voice was barely a whisper. I felt my stomach drop. What's not natural? I whispered as my fingers gently brushed his forehead. The sickness, he murmured. It's coming for me. My breath hitched. A curse? Lucien's breathing was shallow now, and he looked too pale, too weak. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of desperation, that made my heart ache. You need to leave, Celeste. They'll come for you, if they know. I didn't understand, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going anywhere. Not without him. I'm not leaving you, I said firmly. Lucien smiled weakly, his hand reaching up to touch mine. Then stay close. And for the first time since I'd met him, I realized just how deeply I was tied to him. Whether I was ready or not, the bond between us was real. Chapter 6. A bond tested by fate. I should have known something was off. The moment I stepped into Lucien's estate the next morning, I could feel it in the air. The usual intensity that surrounded him was missing. It was like walking into a place where the lights had been dimmed, where the magic had faded. Lucien was slouched on the couch in the main room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His golden eyes, usually sharp and full of life, were dull. The once intimidating presence he exuded was now diminished, like he was a shadow of the man I'd met. I stopped in the doorway, staring at him for a moment, trying to understand what I was seeing. The air was thick with tension, and the ache in my chest that had been growing since yesterday only seemed to deepen. Lucien? He looked up at me slowly, blinking as if he hadn't expected me to be there. His voice was rough, weak. "You didn't have to come," he said, but there was no real bite to it, just exhaustion. I crossed the room in a few long strides, not caring that my heart was hammering. "I didn't have to, but I wanted to. What's going on with you?" He gave me a half smile that didn't reach his eyes, pushing himself up from the couch. "Just a little exhaustion. I'm fine. Don't worry about me." "Exhaustion?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Lucian, you look like you've been run over by a damn train." He laughed softly, but it was hollow, not the deep, confident chuckle I was used to. "I'm fine, Celeste, I promise. Nothing to worry about." I wasn't convinced, not for a second. I'd never seen him like this, not even close. The Lucian I knew was strong, always in control, always a force to be reckoned with, but now his movements were sluggish, his eyes unfocused. "You're lying to me," I said, my voice firm. "Tell me what's really going on." Lucian's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker crossing his features, but it was gone before I could pinpoint it. "I told you, I'm fine, just a little under the weather." "No, you're not," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "What happened to you?" For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Then Lucian exhaled slowly and looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's complicated. I'm not proud of it, but it's just a side effect of, well, something I can't change." "A side effect of what?" I demanded, stepping closer. "What are you not telling me?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his gaze softened. "I'll tell you everything, but not yet. Not until I know I can protect you from it." I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to hear that everything was fine, that whatever was happening to him wasn't going to affect me. But deep down, I knew it was already too late for that. "Lucien, I need you to trust me." He cut me off, his voice raw. "And I need you to stay safe, Celeste." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as I nodded, even though my gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong. Later that day, my mind was still reeling from my conversation with Lucien, his words, his exhaustion, the something he was hiding. I couldn't just ignore it. I had to find out what was really going on with him. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went to my grandfather's study. His old journals and notes had always intrigued me, but now they felt like the only place I could start looking for answers. I rummaged through the piles of papers on his desk, finding the usual scraps of notes about ancient history, old myths, and strange phenomena. But then, buried beneath them, I found something that made my heart stop. A series of letters, handwritten, yellowed with age. The ink faded. The first letter was addressed to someone named Alistair Vaughn. The name struck me immediately, like a cold shock to my chest. I quickly read through the letter. It was clear that my grandfather had known Vaughn. They had worked together on something dangerous. The letter referred to forbidden magic, and I felt a knot form in my stomach as I scanned the words. Alistair Vaughn was no stranger to dark magic. He had once been an alpha, a powerful leader, until he had been excommunicated for his reckless use of magic that could break even the strongest of wolves. The very idea of using magic that could weaken and kill a werewolf made my blood run cold. I pulled out more letters, reading them with increasing dread. There were references to the pack, to Lucian's exile, and to something that sounded like a curse. My grandfather had been involved in some kind of dangerous ancient magic, and somehow Lucian had been caught in the middle of it. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just my grandfather's unfinished business. This was mine now, and I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the letters pressing down on me, my thoughts racing. The connection between Lucian and the mysterious Alistair Vaughn was clear now, but there was still so much I didn't understand, so much I needed to know. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Whatever this was, it was bigger than both of us. But I wasn't walking away, not from Lucian, not from this. The phone call came just after I'd gotten home from another long day of endless questions about Lucian's health. Questions that, despite my best efforts, still went unanswered. My uncle's name flashed across my phone screen, and I immediately felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I hadn't expected him to contact me after yesterday's conversation, but here he was, like a shadow, demanding my attention. A quick glance at the time told me it was far too late for casual chit-chat. "Celeste, we need to talk." His voice was hard, more serious than I'd ever heard it, and I immediately braced myself for what was to come. "I'm busy, Uncle Marcus. What is it this time?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though a wave of unease crept into my chest. "Meet me, now." It wasn't a request, and there was no room for negotiation. The phone call ended abruptly, leaving me standing there, phone in hand, knowing full well what was coming. I didn't have to go far. His office wasn't far from my apartment. When I arrived, the door was ajar, and the shadows inside swallowed the space. Marcus stood at his desk, his expression grim, like he had been waiting for this moment to come. "Sit," he ordered, his eyes locking onto mine as soon as I stepped inside. I did as told, though every inch of my body screamed that something wasn't right. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. His gaze softened for a moment, but only for a heartbeat before he became the cold, calculating figure I knew too well. "I've told you before, Celeste, stay away from Lucien." I opened my mouth to argue, but he raised a hand to stop me, his voice lowering. "You don't understand what you're up against. He's not just a werewolf, Celeste. He's part of something far darker, and you're too close to the fire." I felt my heart quicken, confusion mixing with frustration. "What do you mean? He's not just a werewolf? What is he then?" Marcus leaned forward, his fingers tapping on the desk. "Lucien is a liability to your safety and your life. The Order's watching him, and now they know about you. They'll come for you, Celeste. If you stay with him, you'll share your grandfather's fate." My stomach dropped at the mention of my grandfather. The Order of the Black Crescent. The same group my uncle had warned me about. The same group my grandfather had crossed, and now they had their sights set on me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Uncle. I'm not leaving him." "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was sharp now, his eyes cutting through me like knives. "Lucien doesn't just bring danger to himself, he brings it to everyone around him. You're not just a part of his world, Celeste. You're a target now. And they'll use whatever leverage they can to hurt you, to destroy you." I stared at him, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to calm the rage that simmered beneath the surface. "I don't care about the Order, and I don't care about my grandfather's past. I care about Lucien. He's not what you're making him out to be." Uncle Marcus looked at me with a sadness that seemed to pierce through my defenses. "Then you're already lost," he said softly. "I tried to warn you, but if you continue down this path, you'll be walking into your own grave." With that, he turned away from me, the finality in his movement sending a chill through my spine. I didn't know what to say to that. How could I explain that my heart wasn't in the same place it used to be? That I couldn't leave Lucien, not when everything in me screamed that he was the one I was meant to be with. But one thing was clear, my uncle wasn't done trying to pull me away from him, and if he had his way, I would be forced to choose between my family and my bond with Lucien. The night had barely begun to settle when I arrived at Lucien's estate, my thoughts still racing after my meeting with Marcus. I barely had time to process the weight of what had just happened, but when I stepped into the house, the atmosphere was heavy in a way that I couldn't ignore. Killian was pacing in the living room, his usual composed demeanor gone. He looked up when I entered, his eyes filled with concern. "Celeste," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." I could tell something was wrong by the look on his face, and the knot in my stomach tightened. "What's happened?" He didn't answer at first, but led me into the hallway where Lucien was lying on the couch, his breathing shallow. His skin was paler than I'd ever seen, and his normally powerful frame seemed diminished. His eyes were closed, but even from where I stood, I could feel the weakness radiating off him. I rushed to his side, kneeling down and touching his hand. It was cold, too cold. "Lucien?" I whispered, panic threading through my voice. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking as though he was struggling to focus. "Celeste," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm fine, really." I didn't believe him, not for a second. Killian's face was grim as he crossed his arms. "This isn't just exhaustion, Celeste. Something's happening to him. The sickness, it's not natural and it's getting worse. I turned to Killian, my heart racing. What's happening to him? What's wrong? Someone in the pack has been poisoning him, Killian said, his voice low and full of anger. Someone who was loyal to him once, but now the pack is fractured. The trust has been broken. My stomach twisted at his words. Poisoning? How is that even possible? I don't know, Killian said, but Lucian's running out of time. If we don't find out who did this and stop it, he won't survive. I glanced at Lucian, who was struggling to stay awake, his eyes dimming as his body fought to stay conscious. My heart ached for him. I'll help, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. I won't let you go through this alone. Lucian smiled weakly, his hand reaching for mine. You're already in too deep, Celeste. I won't let them hurt you either. But you have to be careful. I gripped his hand tighter, determined. I'll stay with you, Lucian. I'm not going anywhere. Chapter 7. A Desperate Gamble. I stormed through the door, the anger bubbling up in my chest like a volcano that had been quietly waiting to erupt. I had enough. I couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion anymore, couldn't turn a blind eye to the cracks I'd been noticing in my family's story. The weight of everything that had been happening pressed against me, suffocating me. I needed answers, and I was going to get them, no matter what. My mother looked up from the kitchen, a soft smile on her lips that instantly faded when she saw the fire in my eyes. I didn't wait for her to speak. What happened to Grandpa? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended, but there was no holding back. What really happened to him? She froze, her face paling as she set down the dish she was holding. There was a look in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before, something I couldn't place, but I knew it was the look of someone who was about to admit something they'd kept hidden for far too long. I crossed my arms, refusing to back down. You're gonna tell me everything, Mom, now. She sighed, her shoulders slumping, as if the weight of 1,000 secrets had finally gotten to her. Celeste, it's not what you think. I think you've been lying to me, I shot back, my frustration building. I think Grandpa didn't just die. You've been keeping something from me, and I'm tired of pretending it's all some coincidence. Celeste, what happened? I wasn't going to let her brush me off this time. Why did Grandpa die? Was it because of the order? Her face fell, and she closed her eyes for a moment like she was gathering the courage to speak. When she finally opened them, they were filled with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe? The order, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. They weren't just after him. They were after all of us. Your grandfather tried to protect the pack, Celeste. He was trying to shield them from the order's influence, but... She trailed off, her voice faltering. But what? I pressed, my pulse quickening. Your grandfather, he was killed for standing against them, she admitted, her voice breaking. He wanted to protect the werewolves. He knew the order was dangerous, knew what they were capable of. He wanted to stop them, but they came for him first. I could feel my stomach drop. Every word she said felt like a punch to the gut, each one making the air around me thicker and harder to breathe. You're telling me Grandpa died because he was trying to help the werewolves? And you knew about it? Her face hardened, a look I hadn't seen since I was a child. It wasn't just your grandfather. We've all been involved, Celeste. Your family, we've been working with the order. Your grandfather's death was just the beginning. We've been walking a dangerous line for years. I took a step back, my mind reeling. The ground felt like it was shifting beneath my feet, and I struggled to keep my balance. You worked with them? I whispered, the disbelief in my voice palpable. You've been working with the enemy this whole time, and you never told me? She lowered her head, unable to meet my eyes. We didn't want you to be involved. We didn't want you to be a part of this world, Celeste, but you're already too deep. You've crossed a line, and there's no going back now. I was shaking, my heart thudding in my chest like a drum. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. My own family had been working with the enemy. The very people who had killed my grandfather were the same ones my family had been involved with. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I can't believe this. My voice was barely a whisper. I thought you were protecting me, but you've been hiding the truth from me. all along. I was trying to protect you, Celeste. I was trying to keep you safe. By keeping secrets, by lying to me. I laughed, the sound bitter. I've been fighting to get closer to Lucien, to understand what's going on, and now I find out that you've been part of the problem all along? My mother's face softened, and she reached out to me, but I pulled away, shaking my head. No, I'm done. I turned and walked out, the weight of the truth sinking in with every step I took. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that my family had betrayed me, or that I had no idea what to do with the knowledge that Lucien's enemies had been right in front of me this entire time. I didn't know where else to go, so I found myself back in my grandfather's study, his notes, his journals. They felt like the only place left where I could make sense of this madness. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I found myself poring over his journals, flipping through pages I'd read 100 times, trying to find something that could explain all of this. There had to be something in his research that could help Lucien, something that would explain why I felt so torn between my family and the man I couldn't stay away from. And then I found it. A page in his journal that looked different from the others. Older, worn, like it had been handled many times. The words on the page were shaky, as if he had written them in haste. There's a cure, I whispered, reading the words aloud, barely daring to believe them. For Lucien's sickness. A cure. The page went on to describe a rare lunar flower, one that could heal even the deepest, most painful of curses. But it wasn't just lying around for anyone to pick. No. This flower grew deep within the Blackwood Forest, a place guarded by ancient magic so powerful it could protect the flower from any who dared to approach it. But then came the part that made my stomach drop. The Order controls the land. They've marked it as their territory. I stared at the words, feeling the weight of them press down on me. The Order, the very people my family had been working with, controlled the land where the cure could be found. It was impossible, but then it wasn't. Nothing about this world made sense anymore. I slammed the journal shut, frustration and fear mixing together in a swirl of anger. I had to find a way. I couldn't let Lucien die, not when there was a chance to save him. The stakes were higher than ever, and I had no idea what I was walking into, but one thing was clear. If I wanted to save him, I was going to have to face the very people who had killed my grandfather, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what that would mean. The forest was darker than I expected. It wasn't just the trees that cast their long shadows or the thick canopy above us that blocked out the sky. It was the very air itself. It felt heavy, as though it were alive and watching, waiting for us to make the wrong move. I walked beside Killian, my heart hammering in my chest. The others, loyal wolves who had come with us, moved in silence around us, their steps light on the forest floor. The deeper we went, the quieter it became, until even the usual hum of nighttime sounds seemed to be muffled by an invisible hand. I could feel the pulse of magic in the air, thick and oppressive. It wrapped around me like a cloak, pulling at the edges of my mind. I swallowed, trying to push down the unease that spread through my veins. This place, it was nothing like the world I'd known. It's getting thicker, Killian said under his breath, glancing at me. His face was set in determination, but his eyes, sharp and watchful, betrayed a hint of caution. Stay close. The deeper we go, the more unpredictable this magic will get. I nodded, forcing my legs to move, though every part of me screamed to turn back. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not when Lucien was waiting, growing weaker by the hour, and not when there was a cure. The cure? Just within our reach? Are you sure this is the right place? I asked, my voice shaky despite the bravado I tried to put into it. It's the only place, Killian replied, his voice steady, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he scanned the surroundings. This flower is the only thing that can save him. We just have to be quick. The Order's influence reaches far, and we're not alone out here. The tension in his voice had me glancing around, my senses heightened as the night seemed to grow even darker. The shadows seemed to shift, stretching unnaturally as we moved deeper into the forest, the magic here pressing against my chest like a physical weight. My thoughts kept returning to Lucien. I couldn't lose him. Not after everything we'd been through, not when we were so close to finding a way out of this nightmare. I pushed the thoughts aside as we finally reached a small clearing. The moonlight broke through the trees above, bathing everything in silver. In the center of the clearing, glowing faintly with an ethereal light, was the flower. The lunar flower. It was beautiful. The petals shimmered like liquid silver, its glow casting a soft halo around it, like something out of a fairy tale. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped closer, awestruck. "We found it," I whispered, my voice filled with awe and relief. Killian stepped beside me, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the clearing. "We can't waste time. Grab it and let's get out of here." I nodded, but before I could move, I felt it, the shift in the air, a pulse of dark magic that sent a shiver down my spine. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as the familiar weight of being watched settled over me. "Too late," Killian muttered, his body tense as he turned toward the trees. Before I could react, a voice rang out, dark and commanding. Well, what do we have here?" I froze, my blood running cold as a figure stepped from the shadows, his tall frame casting a long, ominous silhouette. Sebastian Vaughn. I hadn't seen him in person before, but I knew who he was. The leader of the Order, the man who had destroyed my grandfather, and the one who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. "You've crossed a line, Celeste." Sebastian's voice was like velvet, smooth but full of malice. "And now you're in my way. I didn't back down. I couldn't. I'm not going to let you take it. Not this time." Sebastian's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Ah, but you don't have a choice, do you? I'm afraid the lunar flower isn't for the likes of you. It's part of a much bigger plan, one that doesn't involve you." Behind him, several more figures stepped forward, their presence cold and threatening. The Order's enforcers. They had us surrounded. "You're making a mistake," I said, trying to stand tall, though my heart raced in my chest. "I won't let you hurt him." Sebastian's gaze flicked toward Killian, his smile widening as if he'd just won a game. "The Alpha is already a lost cause. His time is running out, Celeste. And you?" He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You'll have to choose. Your mate or the truth." The tension was palpable, my pulse pounding in my throat. I could feel the bond between me and Lucian, even from here, and it was shouting at me to protect him, to keep him safe. But what could I do against the Order? A movement caught my eye. Killian had shifted into his wolf form, his large muscular frame poised to strike. The wolves beside him followed suit, their eyes glowing in the darkness. It was time. We were going to fight. "Get the flower," Killian snarled, his voice rough as he readied himself for battle. But before any of us could make a move, Sebastian raised a hand, signaling his enforcers to hold back. "No need to rush, Killian. This isn't just about the flower. It's about you." I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't care. I was done waiting. With a growl, I lunged toward the flower, my hands shaking as I reached for it, determined to take it no matter what. Chapter 8. Betrayal in the Dark. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, caught in the thick tension that hung in the air like an unspoken threat. The moonlight was still streaming through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out, stretching just a little too far, too long. My heart was racing, pounding in my chest as I stared at Sebastian Vaughn, the man who had been the cause of so much pain, so much loss. He was standing there, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips, his posture relaxed as if he didn't have a care in the world, but his words hit me like a sucker punch. "Lucien's exile," Sebastian began, his voice smooth as velvet, "wasn't my doing. Well, not directly." I narrowed my eyes, already dreading the truth he was about to reveal. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my fists clenched at my sides. Sebastian's smile widened, almost as if he enjoyed watching me struggle to piece it all together. It was his own brother Celeste, his blood, the one person he trusted more than anyone else in this world. He struck a deal with the Order. My stomach dropped. "What?" The word barely escaped me, the shock settling deep into my bones. No, you're lying." "I'm not," Sebastian said, his voice unwavering. His brother Julian Devereaux made a pact with the Order. He wanted power, wanted to control the pack, and Lucien's refusal to back him, well, that was all it took. He sold Lucien out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. This wasn't happening. Lucien's own brother? How could someone do that? And the poison? I whispered, already knowing the answer, but too afraid to hear it. Ah, yes, the poison that's slowly killing him. Sebastian's smile turned sharper, more malicious. That, too, came from his own bloodline. Julian, the loving brother, had a hand in making sure Lucien didn't survive his exile. The poison was just the final touch to his little plan. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me, like the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal, the depth of the deception. Lucien had been abandoned by his own flesh and blood, betrayed by the very people he'd trusted most. A raw, guttural sound escaped my throat. I'm going to make them pay, I hissed, my eyes blazing with rage. I could feel the heat of the bond between Lucien and me, a pulsing light in the darkness, and it made me want to burn everything down, burn it all until there was nothing left. Sebastian's eyes glittered with amusement. You're far too late for that. Lucien's time is running out, and you... He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low whisper. You can't save him. You never could. No, I said, my voice trembling but defiant. I will save him. I took a step toward him, my hands shaking with fury, my heart screaming in my chest. But before I could make a move, a flash of movement caught my eye. Killian. He was on the move, his wolf form sleek and deadly, but the enforcers of the Order were closing in. The battle was about to begin, and the odds weren't in our favor. You've made a mistake, I spat, eyes locked on Sebastian, my body shaking with a mix of fear and anger. You don't know what you're dealing with. Sebastian's smile never wavered. Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The little wolf who thinks she can change the world. But it's already over, Celeste. Lucien is as good as dead, and so are you. The fight broke out almost instantly. Killian, ever the fierce protector, leaped into the fray, his wolves following suit. It was chaos. Shadows of wolves and men clashing, the sound of bones breaking, growls and snarls filling the air. But I couldn't focus on the battle around me. My eyes were locked on the lunar flower, still glowing in the moonlight. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, not after everything we'd been through. I took a deep breath, knowing what I had to do. As Killian fought to hold back the enforcers, I made a move, lunging for the flower. My hands were shaking as I grabbed it, but before I could pull it from the ground, I felt a sharp grip on my wrist. No, Sebastian's voice came from behind me, cold and unforgiving. You're not going anywhere. I spun around, my free hand reaching for the flower. You're not taking it, I yelled, but before I could make a move, he yanked me backward. The world spun around me as he pulled me away from the flower, his grip tight around my arm. You will regret this, Celeste. His breath was hot against my ear, and I could feel his satisfaction at having trapped me. My heart was racing, but I knew I had one shot. I twisted in his hold, throwing the lunar flower toward Killian, my fingers releasing it just in time. Take it, I shouted, my voice raw. Save him, Killian! Save him! I didn't wait to see if Killian caught it. The enforcers had surrounded me, and there was nothing I could do but fight. But the moment I threw the flower, I knew it was my last chance. Sebastian cursed, his eyes flashing with fury as he watched the flower fall into Killian's hands. But before he could react, two of his men rushed forward to grab me, pulling me away from the fight and dragging me toward the darkness beyond the clearing. Let me go, I screamed, struggling against their grip, but they were too strong. My legs gave way as they dragged me further into the forest, toward the Order's hideout. I had no idea what they'd do to me, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let them take me without a fight. But as I was pulled further away, my mind was on one thing: the cure for Lucien and the hope that it would reach him in time. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, caught in the thick tension that hung in the air like an unspoken threat. The moonlight was still streaming through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out, stretching just a little too far, too long. My heart was racing, pounding in my chest as I stared at Sebastian Vaughn, the man who had been the cause of so much pain, so much loss. He was standing there, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips, his posture relaxed as if he didn't have a care in the world. But his words hit me like a sucker punch. "Lucian's exile," Sebastian began, his voice smooth as velvet, "wasn't my doing. Well, not directly." I narrowed my eyes, already dreading the truth he was about to reveal. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my fists clenched at my sides. Sebastian's smile widened, almost as if he enjoyed watching me struggle to piece it all together. It was his own brother, Celeste. His blood. The one person he trusted more than anyone else in this world. He struck a deal with the Order. My stomach dropped. What? The word barely escaped me, the shock settling deep into my bones. No. No, you're lying. I'm not, Sebastian said, his voice unwavering. His brother, Julian Devereaux, made a pact with the Order. He wanted power, wanted to control the pack, and Lucian's refusal to back him, well, that was all it took. He sold Lucian out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. This wasn't happening. Lucian's own brother? How could someone do that? And the poison, I whispered, already knowing the answer but too afraid to hear it. Ah, yes, the poison that's slowly killing him. Sebastian's smile turned sharper, more malicious. That, too, came from his own bloodline. Julian, the loving brother, had a hand in making sure Lucian didn't survive his exile. The poison was just the final touch to his little plan. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me, like the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal, the depth of the deception. Lucian had been abandoned by his own flesh and blood, betrayed by the very people he'd trusted most. A raw, guttural sound escaped my throat. "I'm going to make them pay," I hissed, my eyes blazing with rage. I could feel the heat of the bond between Lucian and me, a pulsing light in the darkness, and it made me want to burn everything down, burn it all until there was nothing left. Sebastian's eyes glittered with amusement. "You're far too late for that. Lucian's time is running out, and you—" He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "You can't save him. You never could." "No," I said, my voice trembling but defiant. "I will save him." I took a step toward him, my hands shaking with fury, my heart screaming in my chest. But before I could make a move, a flash of movement caught my eye. Killian. He was on the move, his wolf form sleek and deadly, but the enforcers of the Order were closing in. The battle was about to begin, and the odds weren't in our favor. "You've made a mistake," I spat, eyes locked on Sebastian, my body shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Sebastian's smile never wavered. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The little wolf who thinks she can change the world. But it's already over, Celeste. Lucian is as good as dead, and so are you." The fight broke out almost instantly. Killian, ever the fierce protector, leaped into the fray, his wolves following suit. It was chaos. Shadows of wolves and men clashing, the sound of bones breaking, growls and snarls filling the air. But I couldn't focus on the battle around me. My eyes were locked on the lunar flower, still glowing in the moonlight. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, not after everything we'd been through. I took a deep breath, knowing what I had to do. As Killian fought to hold back the enforcers, I made a move, lunging for the flower. My hands were shaking as I grabbed it, but before I could pull it from the ground, I felt a sharp grip on my wrist. "No!" Sebastian's voice came from behind me, cold and unforgiving. "You're not going anywhere." I spun around, my free hand reaching for the flower. "You're not taking it!" I yelled, but before I could make a move, he yanked me backward. The world spun around me as he pulled me away from the flower, his grip tight around my arm. "You will regret this, Celeste." His breath was hot against my ear, and I could feel his satisfaction at having trapped me. My heart was racing, but I knew I had one shot. I twisted in his hold, throwing the lunar flower toward Killian, my fingers releasing it just in time. "Take it!" I shouted, my voice raw. "Save him, Killian! Save him!" I didn't wait to see if Killian caught it. The enforcers had surrounded me, and there was nothing I could do but fight. But the moment I threw the flower, I knew it was my last chance. Sebastian cursed, his eyes flashing with fury as he watched the flower fall into Killian's hands. But before he could react, two of his men rushed forward to grab me, pulling me away from the fight and dragging me toward the darkness beyond the clearing. "Let me go!" I screamed, struggling against their grip. But they were too strong. My legs gave way as they dragged me further into the forest, toward the Order's hideout. I had no idea what they'd do to me, but one thing was clear: I couldn't let them take me without a fight. But as I was pulled further away, my mind was on one thing: the cure for Lucian, and the hope that it would reach him in time. I had never seen Lucian so vulnerable. It wasn't just the paleness of his skin or the shallow, uneven breaths he took. It was the way he looked, like the very life was being drained from him. His golden eyes, once so full of intensity, were now clouded and distant, barely holding on to the strength I knew he had deep inside. Killian and I stood over him, the lunar flower glowing softly in my hands. I could feel the weight of it, the power inside of it, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. The flower was the only hope left for him, the only thing that could save him. "Lucian," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You need to fight. You need to hold on." Killian had been pacing for what felt like hours, his anxiety palpable in the tightness of his jaw and the quick, clipped movements of his steps. "We don't have much time. If this doesn't work, it's over." His voice was strained, but I could hear the unspoken plea in it. He was just as scared as I was. I looked down at Lucian's still form, my heart aching. "It will work. It has to." I kneeled beside him, gently cupping the flower in my hands. Killian stood by, ready to guide me through the ritual. His eyes never left Lucian's face, like he was afraid to blink and miss something. "Are you sure about this?" Killian asked quietly. I nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to choke me. "We don't have any other choice." The ritual was simple, yet ancient and powerful. I had read about it in my grandfather's journals, but I had never imagined I would be using it for Lucian. It wasn't just about healing him. It was about unleashing his power, tapping into the very essence of what he was as an alpha. I placed the lunar flower over his chest, closing my eyes and focusing on the energy that surged from the flower and into Lucian. A soft glow surrounded us as the flower's essence began to cleanse the poison coursing through his veins. The magic was intense, almost overwhelming, but I held on, determined to see it through. As the ritual continued, I felt the shift. Lucian's body began to react, his muscles twitching, his chest rising and falling with a steadier rhythm. His skin, which had been cold and clammy, slowly began to warm, the strength returning to him. But there was something else, something deeper, a surge of power that I couldn't ignore. "Celeste," Killian's voice broke through the haze. "He's waking up." I looked down at Lucian's face just as his eyes fluttered open, his golden irises gleaming with a ferocity that made my breath catch in my throat. His gaze locked on mine, and for a moment there was nothing else, just the two of us. The bond between us flared to life, a pulse of energy that resonated in every fiber of my being. Then, without warning, his hand shot up, gripping my wrist with an intensity that made me gasp. "What?" I started to ask, but his voice cut me off. "You shouldn't have done that." His words were low, a warning wrapped in raw power. His body, still recovering from the ritual, was already starting to hum with an energy I couldn't comprehend. "You've unleashed something I can't control." I had no idea what he meant, but I didn't have time to figure it out. I could see the fury in his eyes, the raw strength that was pouring out of him like an unstoppable force. Lucian's breathing deepened, and suddenly he was sitting up, his muscles flexing, as if he'd never been weakened. His golden eyes locked onto me, and the intensity in them was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't just his alpha nature, it was something more. "Celeste," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but it was filled with such a dangerous edge that I froze in place. "Where is she?" I blinked. "What do you mean? Who are you talking about?" His hand shot out, grabbing mine with a strength that made my pulse race. "The Order. They have you. They're coming for you." His voice was thick with anger, with something deeper, something primal. "I can feel it. I can feel you." He inhaled sharply, his eyes going darker as his grip tightened. "I'll burn them all to the ground." I wasn't sure what I was hearing. The man who had been lying motionless just moments ago was now speaking with such raw power, his words vibrating with the force of his alpha bloodline. It was as though the ritual had awakened something in him, something much more than just the cure. It had amplified the essence of what he was, what he had always been. "Lucian, you're scaring me," I said softly, pulling my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. His grip was unwavering, and I could feel the heat from his skin, the pulse of power that surged from him like a living, breathing thing. "You're mine," he growled, his voice rough like it came from the very pit of his soul. "And I'll never let anyone hurt you. Not again. Not while I'm still breathing." I didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process the raw, untamed energy that was radiating off him. It was like he was a volcano ready to erupt, a force of nature that could no longer be contained. "You can't," I started to argue, but he cut me off, his eyes flashing with golden fire. "I can't what?" he demanded, pulling me closer until I was standing in front of him, his body pressed against mine. "I can't protect you?" His lips hovered just inches from mine, and I felt the overwhelming pull of the bond between us. The connection that had always been there was now stronger than ever, like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. But I knew it came at a cost. "I won't let anyone take you from me," he muttered against my lips, his hands trembling slightly as he held me. "Not again." And in that moment, all I wanted was him. I didn't care about anything else. All the danger, all the risks, none of it mattered when he was this close, when I could feel his power, his intensity, his love for me. All of it so raw and real. "Then don't let them," I whispered, my breath coming in short gasps as my heart raced. "Don't let them take me." Lucian's eyes softened for a moment, the fury subsiding, replaced with something I couldn't quite name. "I won't. I swear to you." And then, before I could think, he kissed me. Slow, intense, as if he was trying to claim me in a way that couldn't be undone. The kiss was everything. It was fire, it was passion, it was a promise. And I knew in that moment that nothing could stand in our way. Chapter 9. The Order's Fortress. The cold stone walls of the fortress pressed in on me from all sides. The air thick with the scent of dampness and something darker, something that spoke of long-forgotten secrets. I was trapped, the weight of the place settling into my bones. But the worst part was that I could hear Lucian in my head, his voice, his heart beating, faint but steady, as if it was calling out to me even from a distance. I was in a small, dimly lit room, the only sound my own breathing. My hands were bound, though I barely noticed the ropes anymore. My thoughts were elsewhere, focused on what had happened, the ambush, the betrayal, the feeling of being torn away from everything I knew. From him. A heavy door creaked open, and I looked up to see Sebastian Vaughn entering. His dark eyes were filled with something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but something close. "Are you comfortable, Celeste?" he asked, his voice smooth, dripping with mock sweetness. I didn't answer. What was the point? Nothing he said could change what I knew in my heart. "You know," Sebastian continued, stepping closer to me, "I had hoped for a bit more compliance. After all, the choice is yours." He leaned forward, his gaze cold and calculating. "I'll give you two options, and I expect you to make a decision." I narrowed my eyes at him. "I'm not making any deals with you," I snapped, the fire in my belly refusing to die even here in this dark place. "So spare me the theatrics." He straightened up, giving me a cold, humorless smile. "Oh, but you will make a choice. It's simple, really." He walked around me, like a predator circling its prey. "Option 1. You betray Lucian, denounce him publicly. You tell the world that he is a monster, a threat, and that you're done with him. In return, I'll let you walk free." I clenched my fists, trying to ignore the bitter taste in my mouth. Betray him? Never. "Option 2, Sebastian went on, his voice lowering. You refuse to comply. You stay loyal to him, knowing full well that I'll make him suffer. And when I'm done with him, you'll be left with nothing. Watch him die and live with the guilt for the rest of your life." My heart lurched. The thought of Lucian, my mate, suffering was unbearable. But there was no question in my mind what I had to do. Is that your great offer? I asked, my voice trembling, but not with fear, anger, fire. To give me an impossible choice? You want me to betray the man I love or watch him die? Sebastian paused, his dark gaze studying me with amusement. Yes, those are your choices. Choose wisely, Celeste. I stood taller, meeting his eyes with a fire I hadn't known I possessed until this moment. You think you can break me with your games? You can't. You'll never make me betray him. Lucian is everything to me. Everything. Sebastian's face remained unreadable, but I could see the slight tension in his jaw. We'll see about that. He turned sharply, exiting the room without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving me alone with the weight of the decision that wasn't really a decision at all. It was simple. Lucian was mine and I was his. There was nothing, not even the order, that could tear us apart. Hours passed, or maybe it was days, I couldn't tell. Time seemed irrelevant in this place. I was still bound to the chair, still staring at the door, my mind racing with thoughts of Lucian. The rage, the helplessness, the love. I couldn't stop thinking about him. And then the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Sebastian, Lucian. My heart nearly stopped when I saw him standing in the doorway, his golden eyes burning with intensity, his body slumped but still standing. His movements were slow, calculated, he was clearly weak, but his gaze locked on mine with a possessive heat that sent a shiver down my spine. Celeste, he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion. You shouldn't have come here. I felt a sob catch in my throat, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to smile. Lucian, I breathed, the name leaving my lips like a prayer. I knew you'd come for me. He staggered forward a few steps, his breathing labored. I didn't want to involve you in this. You didn't want to, I scoffed, unable to stop the bitterness from creeping into my voice. You think I'd let them take me without a fight? Without coming for you? Lucian, I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. He took another step toward me, though it looked like every movement cost him. His hands reached out, touching my face, as if he couldn't quite believe I was really there. I should have kept you safe, Celeste, but now they've hurt you. I shook my head, refusing to let him carry that guilt. I'm here because I choose you. I choose us. The chains that bound me were useless against the power of the moment, the weight of what we had between us. My hands reached for him, brushing his, and I could feel the bond surge between us. He was mine and I was his. I won't let them take you, he whispered fiercely, his voice full of a strength I hadn't heard before. No matter what they do, I'll fight until my last breath. I'll protect you. I smiled at him, my heart swelling in my chest. And I'll fight for you. Always. The sound of footsteps approaching made my stomach twist. It was Sebastian, and I could hear the smugness in his voice as he entered the room again. You're a fool, Celeste, he sneered. You think you can save him? You think he can save you? He looked at Lucian with cold eyes. You're already too late. Lucian, still breathing heavily, turned his gaze toward him, his eyes burning with rage. You're not going to win, not this time. And that was when I knew we were done running, done hiding. With Lucian at my side, nothing would stop us. Not Sebastian, not the Order, not anyone. I looked at Sebastian, my eyes full of fire. You don't get to decide our fate. We do. Lucian's hand found mine, and together, we would tear this fortress down. There was no time for hesitation, no room for second-guessing. Lucian's pack was ready, their eyes alight with fury, their loyalty to their alpha unshakable. I stood beside him as he paced back and forth, his muscles coiled tight, the air around him thick with anticipation. Every breath he took seemed to charge the very atmosphere, and I could feel the bond between us thrumming like a living thing. Are you ready? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos that was unfolding around us. I could see the anger in his eyes, the determination in every line of his face. Lucian was more than just a warrior. He was a force of nature, and I had no doubt that the Order's stronghold wouldn't survive the storm he was about to unleash. His gaze locked onto mine, and for a moment it was like the world around us disappeared. "I'm ready," he growled, his voice deep and dark with that primal intensity that made my heart race. "And nothing is going to stop me. Not this time." With a fierce nod, Lucian turned to his wolves, his alpha presence commanding them without a single word. They were ready to fight, ready to do anything to bring the order down. The battle for everything we held dear was about to begin. The attack was swift, like a wave crashing over the fortress. Lucian led the charge, his wolves moving with lethal precision as they tore through the Order's defenses, their strength and speed unmatched. The sound of battle filled the air. Snarls, growls, the clash of metal against bone, the cries of enemies falling one by one. It was brutal. It was relentless. And there was no mercy. I watched, breathless, as Lucian tore through the chaos with the force of a storm. He was unstoppable, a whirlwind of power and precision, every strike a testament to his strength. The bond between us flared like fire igniting, and I felt his every movement in my own blood. It was as though we were one, connected by something deeper than fate itself. My eyes searched through the madness until they found what I was looking for. Sebastian, the one who had orchestrated this entire nightmare. He stood at the back of the room, watching with cold, calculating eyes as his men fell one by one. I didn't need to say anything. Lucian's gaze met mine, and with a single nod, he knew what I wanted. He was going to end this, one way or another, and I was right behind him. The moment I was freed from my cell, I didn't need to be told twice. I was already running, racing through the halls of the fortress, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts only on Lucian. I didn't care about the guards I passed or the dangers that loomed ahead. I just needed to find him, to be with him. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when I turned the corner, I saw him. Lucian. His powerful frame, his eyes blazing with anger and purpose, standing amidst the wreckage of the Order's men. But when he saw me, everything changed. "Celeste," he breathed, and in that single word I felt the weight of everything, the fear, the longing, the love. His eyes softened just for a moment, and then he was there, his hands gripping me, pulling me into him with a force that took my breath away. I gasped, my hands gripping his shirt as his lips found mine, fierce and desperate, like we had both been starved for this moment. The world around us disappeared. There was no fortress, no order, no enemies. There was only him, only us. "I thought I lost you," Lucian whispered between kisses, his voice strained, almost broken. I couldn't. "Shh," I cut him off, my hands running through his hair, feeling the heat of his body, the pulse of his power as it surged through me. "You didn't. I'm here. I'm always going to be here." His hands roamed to my waist, pulling me closer, as if he couldn't get enough of me. I could feel the raw, undeniable passion that radiated from him. Every inch of his body was alive, alive with the need to protect, to love, to claim what was his. "Don't ever leave me," he muttered against my lips, his voice rough with a hunger I knew all too well. "Not again." "I won't," I whispered back, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." But even in the midst of our reunion, even in the heat of the moment, I knew that the battle wasn't over. There was still work to be done, still a war to win. With a final fiery kiss, Lucian pulled back, his golden eyes gleaming with purpose. "Stay close," he ordered, his alpha voice in full force. "We've got a fight to finish." I nodded, my own heart still racing, but I knew that with him by my side, nothing could stop us. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The air felt different now, as if the weight of the world had been lifted, but also replaced with something heavier. The battle was over, the Order destroyed, and Sebastian was no longer a threat. But the aftermath left me with a strange kind of stillness. A quiet that could only be filled with the pieces that remained. Lucian stood tall before his pack, his golden eyes glinting with an unspoken promise, the strength of his alpha presence radiating from him like a force field. He had reclaimed his place, the position that had once been his by birthright, stolen from him but now restored. He was the alpha again in every sense of the word. "Pack," he began, his voice rich and deep, carrying across the crowd without any effort. "The battle is over. The Order is no more." A cheer rose from the wolves around us, their voices full of pride and relief, but Lucian's gaze remained focused, unwavering as he looked over them. "And now," he continued, his voice softer but no less commanding, "I take my place as your alpha once more, but not just as your leader, as your protector. We will rebuild. We will rise, stronger than ever before." I could feel the bond between us, the way the words flowed not only to his pack, but to me, too. His power, his resolve. It pulsed through me, and I couldn't help the pride that swelled in my chest. Then he turned to face me, and my breath caught. "Celeste," he said, his voice steady but full of something deeper, "the war is over, and I stand here today not just as the alpha of this pack, but as your mate." The pack fell silent, their eyes shifting toward me as Lucian stepped closer, his hand reaching out to grasp mine. "I officially announce Celeste as my Luna," he said, his voice clear and proud. "She is not only my equal, but my partner in everything. We will lead this pack together as one." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my throat tight with emotion. There was no turning back from this, not that I wanted to. Lucian had made his claim not just on the pack, but on me. I was his, and he was mine. Forever. The pack's response was immediate. Cheers and howls of approval rang through the air, and I couldn't help but smile, my heart full. Lucian's eyes were still on me, his gaze softer now, full of affection. "Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for standing by my side through everything. I promise you this. We will build a future for this pack, one that is better than it's ever been. Together." I squeezed his hand, my heart overflowing. I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. The air was thick with energy as Lucian stood before his pack, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. It was time. Killian, his beta, stepped forward, his voice steady. "Alpha, if it pleases you, the pack is ready for the blood oath." Lucian nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I am ready." He turned to face the pack, his powerful figure silhouetted against the moonlight. "This pack has been torn apart for too long. My father's legacy was shattered, and so were we, but no longer." He paused, his gaze shifting to me, his eyes dark and intense. "We will rebuild what was lost. We will rise, and we will stand together as one, united in our strength, our loyalty, and our bond. This pack will never falter again." I stood at his side, my heart racing as I realized the weight of the moment. The bond we shared, the future we were going to build, it wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everyone here, about the future of the pack. Lucian held out his hand to me, and I placed mine in his, the bond between us strengthening with every passing second. Killian stepped forward with the ceremonial dagger, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. "This blood oath binds us," Lucian said, his voice low, steady, but full of power. "It is not just a promise. It is a vow to our pack, to our future, to our people. No one is above this pack, and no one will stand against us again." He pressed the blade into his palm, and I gasped at the sight of blood. The pack was silent, waiting. Lucian didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. "By blood we are bound," he said, his voice echoing through the night. "By blood we are one." He turned to me, the power in his eyes unwavering. "By blood, Celeste, I swear to you our legacy will never die." My heart raced as I watched him. "By blood we are one," I echoed, and I could feel the weight of his vow deep in my bones. Together we stood, united not just by the blood we shared in that moment, but by the bond we had forged, stronger than anything I had ever known. The night was alive with the energy of the full moon, the air thick with anticipation. The pack had gathered in the clearing, their faces filled with pride, love, and a fierce loyalty to the Alpha and Luna. I stood next to Lucian, my heart racing in my chest, my hand clasped firmly in his. This was it, the moment we had both been waiting for. The ceremony that would bind us forever, that would mark the start of our journey together as mate and Luna. The ancient ritual began, the pack leader chanting words that seemed to resonate in the very earth beneath our feet. I could feel the magic surrounding us, thick and tangible, and I knew that this moment would change everything. This was more than just a ceremony. It was our future, our destiny, unfolding in front of us. Lucian's gaze never wavered from mine. His eyes held nothing but love and fire, as though I were the only person in the world. "We are bound," he whispered, his voice low but full of a promise I could feel deep in my soul. The pack's energy was palpable as the ritual continued, the bond between Lucian and me growing stronger with every word, every breath. And when the final words were spoken, when the full moon cast its light over us, it was like everything came alive. The bond between us was complete. We were one. The moment the ritual ended, everything around us seemed to fall away, leaving only Lucian and me. The world was silent, the only sound our breath as we stood there, together, under the full moon. "I promised you forever," Lucian whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "and I'll give you more than that." Without another word, he leaned in, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce, as if he were pouring every ounce of love and passion into it. I kissed him back, feeling the bond we shared surge between us, the connection between us sealing itself, stronger than I had ever imagined. I could feel his power, his heart, his soul in that kiss. And in that moment, I knew this was where I was meant to be. With him under the moon forever. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of amber and pink, casting a soft glow over the estate. I leaned against the balcony railing, my fingers tracing the cool stone as I gazed out over the land that now belonged to us, to our pack. The weight of everything that had happened, the battles, the loss, the rebuilding, seemed to settle into the past, but it wasn't a burden. It was a foundation, and from it we would build something new, something stronger. I felt him before I heard him. His presence was like a pulse in the air, like a beat of my own heart, steady and unyielding. Lucian stood next to me, his broad frame leaning casually against the stone beside mine. His eyes were on the horizon, his expression thoughtful, but I knew that underneath that calm exterior, his mind was on the future, our future. "Are you thinking about the future?" I asked, glancing at him from the corner of my eye, my voice soft but full of curiosity. He looked down at me, his gaze sharp, piercing, and yet full of warmth. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You always know what I'm thinking, don't you?" I shrugged, trying to hide the smile, threatening to break free. "You make it easy." He chuckled, the sound rich and soothing, and it filled the space between us like music. "I've been thinking about how far we've come, how much we've been through, and how much more we still have ahead of us." I nodded, my eyes moving back to the land before us. The forest, the fields, the pack's territory, it all felt right. It felt like home, like the beginning of something we'd both been waiting for without even realizing it. "But we're here now," I said, my voice steady, but I felt the quiet excitement building inside me. "And the war is over. The order is gone. We're free." Lucian turned toward me, the intensity of his golden eyes locking onto mine. The connection between us surged, and for a moment nothing else existed, just us. He reached out, his hand gently cupping my face, his thumb brushing over my cheek. The touch was tender, but there was an edge to it, a promise that made my heart skip. "It's only the beginning," he said quietly, his voice low and serious. "Our future is just starting, Celeste. And I'm ready for it, with you." I smiled, my heart swelling with everything I felt for him. Everything we'd been through had led us to this moment, and I had no intention of letting go of it. I leaned into his touch, my hand finding his. "Are you ready for forever?" I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath, but the weight of the question hung in the air like a promise. Lucian's eyes darkened with something fierce, something hungry, but it wasn't just lust. It was desire, yes, but more than that, it was a recognition of what we were to each other. A deep, unwavering certainty that this was meant to be. He stepped closer, his body warm and solid against mine. "I've been waiting for it all my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion, with something primal that made my breath catch. Before I could respond, he cupped the back of my neck and pulled me in, his lips crashing into mine. The kiss was fierce, claiming but full of everything we had. It was the kiss of someone who had fought for this, who had earned it. It was passion, love, and the unspoken vow that we would face everything together from now on. I kissed him back, my arms wrapping around his neck as I pressed myself closer to him. The bond between us flared to life, wild and untamed like fire spreading through my veins. I couldn't imagine a life without him, and I didn't want to. I never would. When the kiss broke, we stood there, foreheads touching, both of us breathing a little heavier. Lucian's hand remained on my neck, his thumb gently caressing the skin there as though he couldn't quite believe I was his. "I don't ever want to let go of you," he whispered, his voice raw and full of so much love I could hardly contain it. "You never have to," I whispered back, my lips brushing against his. "We're in this together. Always." And as we stood there, watching the last rays of the sun slip below the horizon, I knew that this was only the beginning. Our journey together, our future, was just beginning, and I was ready to face it with him. Whatever came next, we would take it on together, forever.